Ed, thank you again for agreeing to jump on a call with us. I know, what's that?
Thank you.
Yeah. I know you're, how do we say, elbows deep in helping contractors respond to common sense approaches to this pandemic. And many of our peers in property restoration are on the front lines of trying to help businesses get ahead of a proper response to COVID-19, the coronavirus.
Yes.
So we wanted to take some time to jump on. Obviously, your area of specialty is law. You are the restoration lawyer. And so what that looks like from a legal standpoint, that what contractors should be looking for. So just to give people a quick summary of your career in law and as it intersects with property restoration, your initial introduction to the industry was actually when your career started, correct? In California in the mid 90s, your
Yes.
first client was a homeowner who had been negatively impacted by a restoration contractor's poor workmanship, and that became one of the first six-figure settlements for a mold case in California, correct?
Yes.
So your initial introduction to property restoration contractors in the industry was on the other side.
Absolutely. Yeah. And we handled hundreds of those.
Yep.
And contractors started inviting me to their conventions, and they asked me to give presentations as to what they needed to do so that I would not sue them.
Yeah.
And I made the presentations, and they started offering me work, which I eventually accepted, and that's how we ended up here.
And a lot of that was centered around microbial growth and the negative impacts of that.
Big part of it, yes.
Yep.
I got very interested in the scientific side of it, and I took an examination and earned a certification as a certified indoor air quality professional.
Yeah.
And I don't maintain that certification anymore, but learned a lot. That was through AEE. They have an excellent program.
AEE. Well, and so 95, you're getting into law. You have this case. 94, IICRC comes out with the first S500, correct?
You're quizzing me on the year that the first edition of S500 was released, John?
No, I'm not trying to quiz you. I'm just, timeline. I think if I remember correctly, S520 that deals with mold didn't come out until 99, so several years later.
Right.
And you had involvement with both of those, correct?
Yes, I did. Yeah, the second edition of S500 and the first edition of S520.
S520. So you pivot rather quickly to now representing lawyers, representing contractors, and you've been doing that for nearly 25 years now. You've been dubbed the restoration lawyer, and I remember reading one of your early presentations to then what RIA, Restoration Industry Association, was the ASCR, right? In 2007 they changed to RIA. And so that was a significant change. You were involved in that time when things are really churning and changing. And now, fast forward to 2019, you're involved in another significant transition in the history of the industry and the RIA in particular. So 2019, Mark Springer, who's the president-elect, releases his document or manifesto, Our Greatest Need, which lays out a 7-step plan.
Right.
And out of that, the Restoration Industry Association Advocacy and Government Affairs, or the AGA committee, is a result of that. And you were named as the founding chair, correct?
Correct, yes.
So can you give people just maybe a quick snippet of, how that all went down and how you became involved in that process?
Yeah, sure. I received a call from RIA saying that they wanted to dedicate an emphasis to advocacy on behalf of restorers because things were really starting to change, particularly with respect to insurance claims. Yeah. And they felt like they weren't getting a fair shake from standardized pricing platforms, from third-party building consultants, and TPAs.
Yeah.
and they wanted to get organized and speak with a unified voice. And the goal of the AGA is to achieve a fair and level playing field for restoration contractors.
Yeah. And that's that's actually what the hashtag for the conference, the upcoming conference, right? The fragmented no more.
Fragmented no more is the theme. Yeah.
Yep. And so, as we fast forward rather rapidly, just with less than a year's time, right? You're now named so you're the chair currently of the AGA committee, the founding chair, and you've also been named the restoration contractor advocate.
Yes.
And how is that, I guess briefly, how is that different? How does that, it adds to your duties with the AGA, but what is the emphasis of the restoration contractor advocate?
The restoration contractor advocate's position is to pursue and campaign for the positions adopted by the Restoration Industry Association on controversial issues with the goal of achieving a fair and level playing field.
Yeah, yeah. Which is, I mean, kind of putting teeth to the plan, right?
Yes, exactly. Executing on the plan. And
Yep.
the AGA collects the information, does the research, and formulates the positions. And
Yep.
then I go out and try to broker deals to bring those positions into reality.
Yep. And so, you're doing all of this, and then you also, we have this outbreak in our nation and globally, and so restoration contractors are gearing up. The RIA recently did the town hall, which has some excellent information for multiple industry professionals on considerations for responding. So we want to get to that meat of what we want to talk about today is the relationship between a COVID-19 and the legal standpoints of that. And so I was thinking about this. It's interesting. So even prior to this outbreak, I know you've given several resources and webinars and those kinds of things on contracts in general. And it's a little bit surprising that, we're in 2020 and that's still a challenge for some contractors to protect themselves in that way. And so just in a general standpoint, even before COVID-19 becomes an issue, what would be, maybe one key thing that contractors need to stop doing with regard to their contracts, and one thing they really should start doing, just contracts in general?
Well, strangely to me, John, a lot of restoration contractors are still using traditional work authorizations.
Yeah.
And by traditional work authorization, I mean a one-page form that states that the property owner authorizes the contractor to come in and perform some work to return the property to its pre-loss condition, and the insurance company is directed to name the contractor on a check.
Yeah.
And they should stop using those. I like to say that performing restoration work with a traditional work authorization is kind of like playing football with sandals on. You could do it,
Yeah.
but it's not going to turn out very well.
Would it be, it's not even, my kids have the Crocs, and when you put the strap down, that's
right.
Game mode or whatever.
Yeah, exactly.
It's not even game mode.
Right, it's not even game mode.
I'm sure I said that wrong, but.
Yeah. So what they should start using is payment contracts, actual contracts that look similar to a construction contract where there's an obligation by the owner to actually pay the contractor for the work. And I understand that a lot of this work is paid for by insurance companies, but the best practice in my quarter of a century of experience is to have a contract provision that holds the customer personally responsible for any amount that the insurance company is not going to pay.
Yeah.
Some companies have very successful business models that are strictly based on accepting whatever amount of money the insurance company is going to pay, and that works for them. I think that's risky. Even if that's your business model, you always have to collect the deductible because that's necessary to trigger coverage.
Whereas some contractors try not to, or Yeah, I know you practice law in California. I know they always kind of set the early precedents, and you've talked at other times about some of the things that are going to be coming out of California that probably soon will affect all states.
Right.
Um, and so, so in now transitioning from just contracts in general to the COVID response, um, in the town hall meeting, I felt like you had a really good quote, you know, and it's a generic one, but the haste makes waste, right?
Yes.
Where if we rush into something, and I've talked to several peers in the industry, and some companies are going gung ho, and some companies are really holding back. But I know for me that's a challenge when you have a client that you do the majority of their services, and they legitimately need help in implementing, you know, some kind of response. Some people could see that as opportunistic, but you know, we're a service-based industry, and this is a period of need. So, what have you learned from a legal standpoint about setting your company and your team up for success and those considerations before a team responds? I guess that employer relationship and responsibility from a legal standpoint.
Yeah, so there's a lot of homework that needs to be done in order to embark on one of these projects successfully. And it's a real challenge because right now there's so many unanswered questions. So what I'm telling everybody to do is to try to stay abreast of the information as it's coming out,
Yeah.
pay particular attention to respected authorities, CDC, WHO, and the others regarding the way the disease is spread, what happens to the virus after a period of days, and with a special focus on worker safety. That always needs to be the number one priority for employers.
Yeah. Yeah. And I know, I think we talked a bit offline. You had mentioned that, I think that's, I talked to other contractors in the area, and that's, you know, they're calling L&I and trying to, you know, what are the workman's comp implications and those kinds of things. And then it was brought up in the town hall too, considering if you're not properly protected, what potentially, which is the same thing we deal with mold, even though this is very, very different. You know, if you aren't following the proper protocols, you could be, you know, affecting people at home and those kinds of things. And so while they're very, very different, there's some overlap in how we need to respond.
Yes.
And there's no protocols yet, you know, as far as I have seen from like the CDC and those kinds of things. So um, when I spoke to you the other night, you were, you know, I think you said you've been working basically dawn to dusk and beyond on contracts as contractors are trying to respond. And I know those people you've been dealing directly with, and then also put out some contract resources for restoration contractors. What are you seeing as far as recommendations for contract language and how to message to clients and set up proper expectations
Right.
from that legal standpoint?
Well, you know, when I embarked on this, I had no idea how vast and how complex the problem was going to be
Yeah,
and how many potential legal issues there are. But it's really, really very extensive. And normally when I sit down to draft a contract, I want to try to keep it on the short side. When
sure.
we're working on a commercial contract, we've got a little bit more leeway to make them a little bit longer. But by the time I ran through all of the different areas where contractors are exposed and facing serious risk with this, it turned out to be a very
Yeah,
extensive contract. And so one of the first points right off the bat is to try to get a very clear vision as to what your value proposition is to your customer. What is the customer getting for the money? And we don't want to just take customers' money for the sake of taking their money. We want to make sure they're getting some benefit out of it in the process. But this is not like mold, where we can take a picture of a wall that has mold on it and then remove that section of the wall and replace it, and then take another picture to show that the mold has been carried out of the building. We can't
right.
do that with this. You can't see it, smell it, hear it, touch it, photograph it. And this, unfortunately, is going to create an opportunity for bad actors to enter this industry and claim that they have done work to eradicate the COVID-19 virus and not really have much in the way of information to back up that they've done it. Yeah. And at this point, I'm aware of no certifications or licenses that are available to show that somebody is qualified to do this work. And there's a considerable amount of controversy in the industry about the proper methods to address it, what products to use, and what techniques to use in applying those products. And restorers are unfortunately going to be judged by this when the inevitable hurricane of lawsuits comes from all of this. Yeah. By hindsight, they're going to sit down and look at a file and look at the results of a project. And these people, the Monday morning quarterbacks, if you will, are going to have information that's not available to contractors now before they embark on one of these jobs. And so one of the challenges is going to be for the contractor to establish evidence about the limitations of the available information at the time the job was performed. It's not the standard of care, obviously, to perform work according to the level of some technology or some science that has not yet been developed or discovered. Yeah. But if you don't have something clear in your file about what you're doing, why you're doing it, how you're doing it, where you're doing it, then you're running into trouble. And so when we talk about documentation, we want to have a file set up in a way so that a third party looking at the file years later, who has no knowledge of the background of the job and does not have eyewitnesses available to interview, can understand the who, what, where, when, and why of the job and basically recapitulate the main events of the project simply by reading the file. And unfortunately, a lot of restoration contractors are not as diligent as they could be about creating that sort of documentation. Yeah. Fortunately, in the era of TPAs and TPCs, they're being forced to create a lot of that documentation, and that protects people. But I'm not going to get off on my complaints about TPAs and TPCs right now.
Yeah. That's obviously what the AGA is trying to. Those are some of the key focus areas, right? The TPAs, TPCs, so and pricing in general. So, well, Ed, I wanted to keep this brief, and I appreciate that. I know there's the resource with the town hall at RIA, and industry outlets are releasing more information as we learn more. And like you said, the government entities that are tasked with this. I mean, everybody's learning to respond to it together. And I know at the upcoming RIA conference, which they just released an announcement saying they're still planning on moving forward, barring them being unable to do so by some edict. And you're planning a session dedicated to COVID-19 response at the conference. And then you've posted the resources for contractors on your website, correct? The edcross.com/COVID-19. Do you want to talk about that resource a little bit?
Yeah, sure. It's edcross.com /COVID-.
Did I do the wrong slash?
But if you just go to edcross.com, it's very obvious there.
You get COVID, yeah.
Yeah, so anyway, what I created was a coronavirus service contract, a standardized coronavirus service contract, and it contains some pretty extensive instructions and guidance material that goes along with it. And this is not, like I said, some simple one-page document. And I did my level best working together with a team of 4 other people who all have very different types of skill sets to refine this thing and address a number of the key vulnerabilities that restorers face going into these projects. And if you pull out your standard contract that says you're going to return the property to its pre-loss condition and you use that for a COVID-19 project, that could be problematic.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Ed. Thank you for your work as a restoration lawyer and with the AGA. And I'm sure as you learn more, you've been active on social media and those things, sharing what you're learning and the resources. So thank you for taking the time, and get some rest and keep doing good work.
Yeah. Thank you very much, John. I appreciate the opportunity.
Yeah.
Romantic.